been covering the CIA for
too many years.
For too many years, I'd say, for 40 years. When did you first run across the CIA's involvement in overseas drug trafficking?
Vietnam. The whole war, secret war that we ran in Laos was run by the CIA. And what was interesting to me is the Karzai story in the New York Times about his brother being a CIA informant and working for the CIA, and B, in the drug business there, is very reminiscent of how we operated in Vietnam from an intelligence standpoint. What's even more interesting is something that's not in the Times report. The control officer for the Karzai family that was recruited after 9/11 was a guy named Thomas Clines. Well, Tom Clines is infamous in CIA history. He was involved in Iran-Contra. He was the aide to the associate director for operations of the CIA, which is the Covert Operations Director, the late Ted Shackley. And Clines was known as Mr. Spook. I mean, he's a guy who operated behind the scenes for years. And the idea that as an old man, a guy who is close to 80 years old now, the fact that they brought him to work the Karzai family and then help install the Karzai family into Afghanistan after 9/11 is pretty amazing. But he has been the guy they picked, and it's interesting that they picked him because of his operations with drug dealers in Laos during Vietnam.
During Vietnam, and then we're seeing a similar pattern unfold today in Afghanistan. And another similar pattern from your reporting that I noticed is that the CIA routinely grants citizenship to some of these, what most Americans would consider questionable characters. And that I noticed in the New York Times article today that President Karzai's brother Ahmed referred to himself as an American citizen.
My guess is the deal that the Karzais made before Karzai, the president, agreed to go back to Afghanistan and give up the restaurant business here in America, is that he wanted citizenship for some family members. He wanted protection in case things went very badly for the United States in Afghanistan. They would be able to come here and resettle. We have a long history of giving thugs citizenship. I mean, the most outrageous recent example is the Hamdan family. They were a group of thugs from Lebanon. Jamal Hamdan committed murder multiple times. He shot his sister-in-law. He killed UN security people. And then we welcomed him to the United States and put him in business, and that was all courtesy of the CIA. The agency has a history of getting into bed with very bad characters, saying they do it because they have to, and then when the operations fail or don't succeed, they blame it on the bad characters. And so it sort of leaves a bitter taste in everybody's mouth.
So how do they handle all of this money that is being made in the drug trade? I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars. Afghanistan is now the largest heroin producer in the world by far. Routinely, what has the CIA done throughout its history to move all of this covert money around for their informants or whatever they'd like to call them?
Well, they paid for the secret war in Laos, and they set up a bank. In this case, it was an Australian bank called Nugan Bank. And eventually these front banks failed. Nugan failed very badly. It was really sort of embarrassing for the agency. The head of the bank, Frank Nugan, was found shot to death in his Mercedes-Benz, and in the pocket of his corpse was the business card of William Colby, who was then in charge of operations in Laos for the CIA. But more importantly, Colby became CIA director, so it was quite embarrassing to Colby. Later, we used BCCI in the early days when we were supporting the Mujahideen, back before Osama bin Laden was our enemy. This is when he was our friend. 10 to 20% of the money we used for the Mujahideen went to the Pakistani nuclear weapons program. Our government said we didn't know anything about it. That's not true, but that's how this stuff works. Now, the head of the CIA's operations in Laos at the time, Ted Shackley, got the Distinguished Intelligence Medal from the CIA for paying for that war, that secret war of drug proceeds. Now, whether that's going on in Afghanistan, I don't know.
But it wouldn't be the first time the CIA has done something like that. Now, how logistically do they do that?
In Asia, the way we did it was we used Air America, which was a CIA front airline. Now, these days, when everything's privatized, when you have more private soldiers, mercenaries operating for private companies than you do have military people working for the Pentagon, then you've got a problem of accountability. There is no accountability for this stuff. And I suspect one of the reasons for that is it protects the operations from their standpoint more, so the media can't find out about what they're doing.
So like you wrote in Prelude to Terror, they started privatizing their operations as far back as, you know, at least the 60s or before, and I guess maybe Ed Wilson was one of the first of the arms dealers.
Yeah, they'd recruit these arms dealers like Ed Wilson, like Sarkis-Soganelian, and these arms dealers would then operate through phony private companies. But if you looked into their boards, for example, Soganelian's operation, which armed Saddam, had a board of directors, and on the board was people like Jim Cunningham. He was an old CIA guy, and he was an Air America veteran.
Right.
So they were all interoperating organizations. So the CIA loved buying private businesses. That stopped for a while after the Church Committee investigations in the mid-'70s, then started up again under Bill Casey and never stopped.
And has never stopped. So, so something like Operation Watchtower in Colombia was, I mean, that would be like another example of
that was really military gone amok. That was the U.S. Army participating in narcotic shipments with the Panamanian strongmen, including Noriega, where they were bringing drugs through Panama from Colombia. And we set up towers to guide the airplanes in. It was really embarrassing for the United States.
It is, and it seems to be an ongoing problem that the New York Times once again drew our attention to this morning.
Yeah, Jim Reason and his colleagues did a great job on the story. The thing that would have been nice is if they had talked about the fact that the CIA had a long history of doing this and that Tom Clines had appeared again, risen out of the ashes. This is a man who went to jail for Iran-Contra, and he's brought back by the agency as a contractor to do this and to handle a Karzai. Amazing.
Amazing.